Abraham Lincoln.
Louisiana Purchase, that's a name.
You need to really get off my balls, okay? I'm gonna kick your ass.
Also, why was Michelangelo so stinky? Ew.
Hello everyone, welcome to episode 4 of the Ultraman Files. I'll be your host today, Patrick. I just want to thank you all for your patience, taking a little bit of a break from doing these shows. I can work on things around AYCH. Not going to give too much away at the head of the show right now, but there's some pretty big things coming to AYCH we're getting prepared for, so don't worry. We didn't forget about the Ultraman Files. It's still going to continue. I want to say thank you for everyone that's been listening to the Ultraman Files. Previous episodes over the last few weeks, those have been some of our most listened to episodes of the year, and we really appreciate you listening to those, and there'll be more to come. The goal for today's episode, since it's been a few weeks since the last episode of the Ultraman Files, we'll be covering 4 episodes today, episodes 7, 8, 9, and 10 of Ultraman Decker today. I do plan to cover Red Man issue 3 and the Mystery of Ultra 7 issue 2 at a later episode. But don't worry, I haven't forgot about those. Those will be discussed in time. So I think we'll go ahead and get started with episode 7 of Ultraman Decker, The Light of Hope from the Red Planet. And basically, this is the start of the Ultraman Trigger and Ultraman Decker like mini arc in the show. And the episode opens up with a big shot of Mars, which, if you remember, is where the previous Ultraman host, Kingo, is from. He's from the planet Mars, and at the end of the series, he's able to reconnect with his home planet on the colony there. And so opens up with this little kid like watering some flowers, and then Kingo comes up next to him and sort of like has this nice little moment, because Kingo's like this very outgoing person, and of course he loves flowers, and like part of his goal in the previous season was to spread happiness, and a big focal point was this like very special flower that he was like grooming and like pruning for the whole season, and that bloom finally came through. But that happiness is short-lived in this instance, because the spear, the ball-like aliens that kickstarted the whole plot of this season, they are attacking this like refugee settlement of Martian colony citizens and like other sort of like spacefaring refugees. They're attacking, but we see some old faces, some familiar faces. Akita and Captain Tatsumi from the original Gutslet's team from Ultraman Trigger, they're back and they're fighting off the sphere, and then we get to see Kingo transform into Trigger, and that's sort of what opens the episode until we get to our themes, the theme break. So he sends out a big wave of energy, blows up all the spheres, and then he's talking to his comrades, Tatsumi and Akita, and basically figuring out what they need to do, because like the sphere are still active and it's still dangerous, and like they're sort of been using this time to help the refugees of the Mars colony after the sphere attack. And basically they've been looking out for people in space and in transit, and so Kingo gets the urge, like he needs to go to Earth. There's something going on. He needs to help out. But how to get there, because the sphere's barrier is still intact. But Akita, being the genius that he is, gives him a very special card that's ultra card that's imbued with the energy of the sphere that will allow him to travel back to Earth. And one thing and back into this a little bit, one thing I forgot to mention is that right before the sphere is attacked, he sees this vision of light. He sees a vision of Yuzure in her like celestial light form, and she sort of gives him like a warning: take these objects and go to Earth, which is why he was going in the first place. And what was different is that while he's seen Yuzure in her celestial light form, like she looks different, like this is a different version of her, perhaps from a different time or a different dimension, as we'll find out. But essentially she gives him 3 Ultra cards and a special sword, and it's like, okay, this is very interesting. So essentially it's the Ultra cards of his 3 forms. His 3 forms of trigger, and this card seems to have like this slot for using the abilities from those cards. So the sword transforms into the little trinket for his light gun, and the cards turn into energy, and so he activates his sky form, flies into space, and heads to planet Earth. And meanwhile on Earth, the Guts team there is sort of like monitoring the situation. Like there's this strange dark energy that's kind of like bubbling beneath the surface of the city. It's like, okay, something's going on, some bad stuff about to brew. This dark energy feels familiar. It's like, what are we gonna do? And then there's a breach signal, which is essentially trigger coming in from space, penetrating the barrier. So they send. So Kanata heads out in the Guts Falcon to intercept this energy, but before he can really make too much headway, these giant tentacles shoot out of the ground and like swat the Falcon out of the sky. He transforms in order to save himself, to get away from danger. So he hits the ground running, starts fighting off the tentacles, but then like he gets captured, and before this new wave of tentacles go to strike him, Trigger comes out of the sky, fights off all the tentacles, blows them away, scares them off. And so like there's this meeting of the giants. So like Kanata realizes, oh wait, there's another Ultra. It's like, I've heard stories, this is the Ultraman that saved the Earth 10 years ago, and he's back. And so they turn off their Ultra forms, they meet face to face in human form, person to person, and Kanata's just like starstruck. It's like, oh, you're the Ultra, you're the one that saved the Earth, but also you're from the Guts Select team, the one like my predecessors, the ones I maybe want to join the team in the first place. And he's just like gushing, and he's just like so impressed. And then Kingo's just like very bashful and humble, and it's like, oh, thank you. And like there's an immediate rapport between the two. And so they go back to the Nurse Dressai, to the mothership, and they're basically just like, oh, look who I ran into. It's Kingo, the famous. And everybody's sort of like, it's like catching up and talking. And then Ryemon kind of sort of quietly observing, and he sort of chimes in, well, if you went to Mars, all those years ago, how'd you get back? And this sort of leads to Kanata and Kingo sort of like very, very like desperately trying to like spin a yarn to try to figure out like, well, actually he's really unearthed, and he was here just before the spear attacked, and it's like, well, if there's basically just like these very obvious lies, and they're just like, they managed to dodge the situation long enough for them to like move the conversation along. And a big portion of the episode is Kingo and Kanata like just sort of like bonding, and like like sort of like the secret of being an Ultraman, like being sort of this like quiet, lonely defender of the planet. And basically Kingo asking Kanata's like, basically asking like, why is it that you choose to be Ultraman? Like, why are you really doing this? Like, where's your heart truly lying in sort of like this fight? Because like this is a dangerous game, and his sort of very cheerful demeanor is sort of put to the side for a moment, and he's trying to make this very serious address to like this young man who's just recently become like this, being put in this position of like protecting the Earth and all of its inhabitants, and like realizing the weight that comes with that. And then he's sort of like, well, I'm not entirely sure yet. And then King goes like, well, you don't have to make up a decision or an answer right away. Just know that this isn't a decision to make lightly, and you shouldn't treat it. You should treat it with the gravity it commands and it deserves. And then there's a nice little moment of them like going back to like lighter fare, and there's a nice little reference of Kengo showing the Ribbit dance when he met Ultraman Ribbit from back in the day. So that was cute. But meanwhile, beneath the surface of the city, there's like this dark energy brewing. And it's the return of Megalothor, essentially the final boss monster of Trigger. And it's been essentially kind of like reinvigorated, resurrected through the influence of the spheres. Because if you remember, the spheres could like possess and enhance other kaiju, or sort of like reconfigure them in some capacity. So essentially, this gigantic, powerful monster has returned, and it was the source of that dark energy we mentioned earlier, and like all those like giant tentacle attacks. So essentially, Megalothor manifests itself in this giant like tornado of darkness. It's like blowing up the cities, and so the Nurse Precise swoops in to save the day. But then, like as with tradition, the sphere sends out this EMP wave, knocks the Dressite out of the sky, the crash lands, and then in the confusion, Kengo Kanata, they sneak away, and they have like a really cool moment where they had the double transformation scene side to side. Always cool to see the previous Toku hero and then the current Toku hero teaming up, transforming at the same time. And so they land on the battlefield. They start attacking Megalothor, and basically because this is a final boss monster, they kind of like can't pussyfoot around. They have to like really go and attack him with everything they got. And I like how they're just like spamming their forms, like just like quick changing from one form to the next just to lay it in. And there's a great moment where both Trigger and Decker assume like their red like power forms, like the strength focus forms, and basically to do like this combo punch and strike the monster together. And it puts us a really cool like aerial shot looking down of the simultaneous punch that the two land on the kaiju. There's like this compressed like explosion, like close up on it. And at this moment, it's time for Trigger to show off his new toys. So he summons the special sword that he was given by Yuzure, and he starts like swiping cards. He swipes his balance multi-type form, sends out this wave of energy, attacks, and essentially like cuts open this gash in the carapace of Megalothor. He's charging up his next big move, and while Decker is like holding off the tentacles so he gives him an open shot, Trigger goes in for that final blow, but then he hears a voice he never thought he'd hear again, a voice that calls out his name, Kengo, and then he's like, well, that can't be right. That's not who I think it is. And within the wound, you see Chimera's face, like the big bad villainous orchestrator of all the crimes and the destruction of the previous season. The villain who had just like this passion, this lust for Trigger, or the Trigger she knew from thousands and thousands of years ago. The Chimera that died in Trigger's arms, finally seeing the error of her ways as she drew her last breath. And he sees, like, he stops. It's like, oh, that's Chimera. What the hell is that? What does this mean? And then that moment, Megalothor disappears in this tornado, and then that's where the episode ends, setting up the action for episode 8. I will say, like, this episode, it was definitely pretty light on like, I guess, like, heavy content. It's always nice to see the previous previous heroes kind of meet up, interact with the current one. That's always fun. But I will say it was a little light. Wasn't like a whole lot of stuff happening, but not a bad episode. It does remind me of the Trigger and Z episodes from the previous season, which is like, to me, my favorite episodes from Trigger, because like I love Ultraman Z, and just to see those characters back, great, and just seeing just Akito and Captain Tatsumi back were great, because I really hope at some point in the season that we get like a full reunion, like the OG Guts Select team teaming up with the current Guts. And I think that would just be really cool to see them all again, see how they interact. And could we have Marlulu come back? I would love to see that. It was like, personally, I'm happy that to see Captain Tatsumi again. The Captain Tatsumi was so fine. And he's just a cool dude, super handsome. Glad he's back. So that's sort of heads and tails episode 7. Take a little break, and we'll come back and talk about episode 8, Light and Darkness, again. Welcome back. This is our discussion of episode 8, Light and Darkness, again. And in this episode, we see the continuation of the Ultraman Trigger crossover story arc from the previous one, and we get more into like the building drama that's like been going on. Like there's the remnants of Triggers, like world building and like plot and monsters. Those are all like still buried underground, waiting to burst forth, just like they did at the start of this episode, because we see a flower bloom in the middle of a city that looks like the flower that Kingo was cultivating in his entire series, which I still think it's crazy that this like flower that Kingo was meant to, like, oh, this will be like this nice symbolic thing to help engender happiness in people. The flower is named off of like the fictional city in Lovecraft lore that Cthulhu's from, Raleigh, I believe. Crazy that's what they decided to name this flower. Anyhow, this flower blooms, and then like it's like shoots out this pollen that like makes all the people passing by like kind of collapse on the ground in like this dreamlike state, like they're trance, like they're just kind of like milling on the ground, like in this like dream state of like, oh, they're like their best dreams are like coming to life in their head. The Gut Sluts team is made aware of this, and they hit the ground running. They're like, okay, we gotta find out what's up with this flower. Why does it look like Kingo's plant? And then like the first thing that Kanata does is just stick his whole snoot in the plant. He gets a whiff full of the pollen, passes out, wakes up in the dream of like his Guts team is like hanging out at his family's rice cracker store. Like they're trying to buy a bunch of crackers from him, and he's just like really thrilled. But then like he realizes this isn't really what I want. Like this is nice, but I don't want to just like sell crackers to my friends. I kind of want something more. So he's able to wake up out of this weird dream state. He's the only one though. The rest of the people that were affected by the pollen, they're still in this dream trance, and they're trying to figure out like what's up with this flower and why does it look like Kingo's plant. And Kingo feels very like responsible. Like the whole reason I was cultivating this flower was so I could use that to make people happy, to like spread goodwill across the world. But he's just like, why is this happening? He feels responsible. And then suddenly there's 3 people entered the ship. It's Yuna from Trigger, like the previous Gut Select member. Like she's back, and she has since joined up with her father's like big tech conglomerate team. And while like Kingo's like, oh, my friend, she's kind of very like curt and direct, and it's like, listen, we have an issue, and my family's company is here to step in and assist with the issue. And she sort of goes into detail that through her family's company, they're able to figure out that the reason why this flower is manifesting, how it's connected to this like ultra ancient dark energy and return of the Megalithor, is that apparently 10 years ago when Chimera like activated the Infinity Core, like the just big massive reserve of just energy that she was after, that the ultra ancient civilization created, that because like this well of energy was like just the sum total of this, or just like civilization's like culture and like life, that the seeds for this like ancient plant was mixed in. So when she turned into Megalothor as like her one-winged angel form, it was sort of got mixed in. And because the remains of Megalothor is like buried in the earth, and the earth is now just like saturated with the energy from the spheres, and the spheres energy sort of like revitalizes and reconstitutes alien matter. That's how Megalothor is able to return. And then within the seeds from this ancient plant, the Gajiran, and Gajiran is essentially connected to Raleigh. And so she decides, okay, we know how we can defeat this, because my family's company has developed a herbicide that will destroy this plant, because they studied Raleigh, Kingo's plant, and in terms of like whatever they were able to pull from the previous examination of the ultra ancient civilization from Trigger. And so like everybody's kind of like going their separate ways to figure out how to get this plan into order. And Kingo goes back to his quarters, and he's sort of like, he's still feeling guilty about his plant being used for evil. But then suddenly Yuna bursts into his room, gives him a great big hug, and she apologizes for being so like curt and like cold to him initially, because she's joined her father's company, her family's company, she has to have this sort of dispassionate front to be like, this is my job, I have to do this, I have to maintain this austere facade for the sake of my family and my duty. But then like now she's in this private moment with Kingo, she sort of like lets all that fall away. It's just like, yes, finally, my old friend, we can catch up. I missed you so much, because I've been here on Earth while all of our other friends, they've gone off to space and continue to like peacekeeping ways essentially. So she's catching up and just sort of like really savoring this chance to like to let loose and be herself in front of her old friend. And then they start talking about like the connection between the ancient plant Gajiran from this ultra society, and then like Raleigh, like why are they similar? And they come to the conclusion that it's because since Kingo inherited these memories from the ultra ancient civilization, due to him being the Ultraman Trigger, or like destined to be Ultraman Trigger, sort of like the reincarnation of the host of Ultraman Trigger. And so like that's why when he was using his skills of like botany science to cultivate this plant that would bring happiness to the world, it's like be like this symbol of goodwill, is because in the ancient civilization the citizens used this plant, the plant Gajiran, medicinally. Like they use this plant to help people, to make them healthy, to like to make people happy, which is like that's why Kingo was so determined to use his plant as a means to help people and to make people happy. And like that's what's the connection, because like the distant past, this plant was used to help people, and so therefore he wants to use his plant to help people. And there's like that connection spanning thousands and thousands of years, and that's why the idea has manifested itself here in this current day. So they realize as much as it kind of hurts, they have to destroy this plant, because it's causing more danger to the world, because this plant is not only putting people into this dreamlike state and like incapacitating, it's also kind of putting it under its thrall, because all the people that have been affected by the pollen, they're sort of like creating this living shield. So when the guts let soldiers go into like the neutralize it, these entranced people or like blocking the way, like holding them back. And obviously they can't attack these other people, because they're like stuck in this state, so they have to find another way. And since plants only pollinate during the day, they decided to have a nighttime attack. So essentially the nurse dress side has been loaded with this special herbicide. They just sort of like poison the plant. It's just so it's like wilting away as they pass over. And then they decided to just go like hard mode. Okay, we gotta blow this motherfucker up from the root. So they fired a big fuck all laser at it, which I love how at this point in the series, just like, you know, the nurse dress side, nurse cannon was like, you know, just last resort weapon, and now just they use it every opportunity to get now, because the laser is just too damn cool not to use. However, at the last moment, the newly revitalized Megalothor returns, erupts from the ground, blocks the beam with a big shield, and I realized, okay, time to go to work. So Kingo and Kanata, they transform, they turn into their respective Ultras, and they start fighting. And the action in this episode is really crazy. There's like a lot of frenetic cuts and jumping and blasting around. They shooting their beams and firing their lasers, attacking with their swords, and there's a big like combo moment where Trigger transforms into his Sky form, and Decker transforms into his Miracle form. Basically, the form that sort of accentuates speed and like special moves. So they're like zipping around, like firing lasers and hitting and he Triggers using like his Sky arrows. And all the while, like, all their attacks are sort of like exposing this crack, this scar on the chest of Megalothor. And then down on the ground, Yuna has sort of like taken to the field with Rimon and the rest of the team. They realize, okay, they realize that scar is up to something. It's important. It's kind of like just protecting it, and that's sort of its weak point. So Rimon like fires this opening shot to like expose the scar. So they all start just like firing away with their guns, and then Yuna's like, "All right, I'm gonna, show them how it's done." So she loads into her light gun just the special chip that has like the powers of Gamora, like this classic kaiju. So it shoots this big fiery beam, splits the crack open. The old that blasts this like gross scar off, and see Chimera like who's stuck within the new Megalothor, because like the Megalothor was revived from its remains due to the due to the sphere's like revitalization energy. So therefore Chimera was as well, because like she was inside the monster when it was destroyed. And so the whole time they're trying to like fight to get her out. So she's like trying to push through the guts and the wound of Megalothor. And it's at this point they're trying all their tricks out. And so what they decide to do, Decker uses the psychic abilities of his Miracle form to like basically to open up the wound and pull Chimera out. Meanwhile, Trigger is using the special sword, the dual sword he got from Yuzure, to like deflect attacks. And then down on the ground, Yuna summons Yuzure in her previous form. Because if you notice, the Yuzure that Yuna summons is the one that we're familiar with, and not the one with the short haircut and the different design that Kenko saw on Mars. So it's maybe thinking that other Yuzure is still, from what time or space she's still yet to like reappear in the larger plot. So Yuna as Yuzure uses her abilities to help pull what remains of Chimera out of the carapace of Megalothor. And it's just it's a little funny because like Chimera is just just covered in goop, just like she's slimed up, and she's just kind of falls into the chest of Trigger. But also there's like I would say a pretty ass dominant shot of Chimera on the screen as she's like covered in slime and like kind of reconnecting with Trigger. And they go and there's like a scene in like Ultra Space where like Chimera and human size is like meeting up with Kingo. They have like this brief little discussion, and then they realize because they expended all this energy fighting Megalothor. Their Hoer timers are going off. It's like, okay, we gotta wrap this up quick, boys. And so this is the redemption of Chimera. And then Chimera and Trigger and Decker all team up to fight Megalothor. So they're like shooting lasers, blasting, with energy balls. Chimera using her laser whips, and there's all just like fighting back and forth. Chimera like uses her whips to like hold the Megalothor in place. Trigger uses his dual sword, and then they have like it's time for the finisher. So Trigger turns into his final form, Glitter Eternity, and then it's just a 3-way beam clash. They just all fire on Megalothor at once, destroy him once and for all, dispel the remaining aspects of the dark energy, and it's gone. And Chimera just sort of silently takes her leave after the battle. And so once everything's said and done, Kingo and Kanata have like this moment together. It's like, Kingo's relieved that he was able to save the person he felt like he failed, because in all of his time as Ultraman, he was able to save and help a lot of people, inspire others, and and through his plan, engender this goodwill, this positivity, this hope in the larger populace. But he couldn't save Chimera. That was beyond his strength at the time. But he was given this second chance, and he's felt like I saved her. She's my one failing, the one big thing he felt like he couldn't achieve has been satisfied. And he sort of remembers his talk with Kanata earlier. It's like, why are you fighting? Like, what's the reason that you're doing this? Who are you trying to save? What are you trying to achieve? What is your purpose for doing this? And Kingo still doesn't have an answer for him, but Kingo assures him it's okay. Your answer will come in time. Just like it took me my entire quote season to achieve what I wanted to, and even then it took another 10 years for him to finally do everything that he needed was to save Chimera. And so he departs, and then there's one last bit where Kingo and Yuna have a private farewell. It's like, you're heading back. She's like, please be careful. I'll keep an eye on things on Earth. Say hello to everyone on the old team back in Mars. And then Chimera appears again. It's like, and she's like, please come with me. Let's go back to Mars. And so basically this is like the start of Chimera's redemption. And we get a little hint, because she came back. She hints that her, essentially kind of like her henchmen, the lack of a better word, Dargon and Hudrum, they may be coming back as well, because she held essentially their essences with her. Like when she pulled out a blue orb and a red orb of energy, it's like, oh, it's those guys. They're coming back too. So Kingo transforms into Trigger, and Chimera and himself, they depart Earth and they head back to Mars. And essentially that's probably going to be the last time that we see them for a while, because the card that was made for him to bypass the Spear's barrier, it was kind of unstable. We don't know how many chances they can get. So from now on, it's up to Kanata and his friends. So it's up to us now. We can't rely on help like this before. So it sort of really resolves Kanata to continue the fighting and to find out exactly why he's fighting and what he's fighting for. So this was a fun episode. It definitely had some nice character moments, and the action was a little crazy. It might be a little hard to follow. It was still fun, and plus it's always just super cathartic. Exciting to see when the bad guy, like Chimera for instance, comes back, has their redemption. And even though it's it is funny how many people in the fandom oh, I want Trigger and Chimera to end up together. They're so cute. And then please ignore all Chimera's crimes, because it's basically just criminal for thousands of years. And then oh, she came back and it's oh, I'm sorry. But that's that's basic villain reform logic. it was still a great time. It's still a fun episode. We'll take another break, and we'll come back with our discussion of episode 9. Welcome back, everybody. This is the next segment, and we're talking about episode 9, Standing Tall for Someone Special. Right away, you can tell there's a difference in how it looks and how this episode feels. There's definitely like a certain like sharpness or like filter on the episode, so it looks and feels different. And honestly, just getting it out of the way, like this is one of my favorite episodes so far of the season. Like this has really good stories and really good action, and just it was a lot of fun to sit and watch, and it pays tribute to a veteran Toku suit actor, Koji Nakamura. He'll be playing the special guest sort of like character in the show, Grace, and also this is a big like tribute episode to Dinah as well, because this whole season is for the anniversary of Ultraman Dinah, so a lot of the episodes are sort of paying homage to those original episodes, but also giving it like their own like feel and flair and individuality in the middle of it all. So to get it started, Kirino and Kanata, they're out on patrol, and as they sort of split up to cover more ground, a young girl approaches Kanata with a camera and a photo. He's like, "What's this about?" And the photo is of Kanata about to transform, and the little girl says like, "Hey, I'll tell people you're Ultraman unless you fight my dad." And he's immediately like freaking out, like, what's happening, what's going on, how does this kid know I'm Ultraman? And so after the intro, it cuts to the tenements, like the living quarters of like this construction company, and you see sort of like this middle-aged man, the little girl who's now we know is Mika, and Kanata sitting in the living room of this house or this tenement, and he's sort of basically like apologizing, like, my daughter's got a little overambitious, like, you know, blackmailing is wrong, kids, don't do that, even if it's to like kind of pump up your dad, who was a universally renowned martial artist who like literally traveled the stars fighting the strongest people in the universe. And on the wall you see like posters and awards and medals and like a cool wrestling belt of like all of his accomplishments. And Grace was sort of, and like in human form, is sort of like kind of bashful and humble. It's like, I was quite the star back in the day, but you know, it's been some time. It's not who he once was. Basically, he came to Earth years ago, like looking for a strong opponent, because he'd heard there's like this Ultraman, there's like this powerful entity that lives on Earth and like fights monsters, and like it's pretty strong. But when he got there, thanks to the efforts of Trigger, like it's an era of peace, so there wasn't really any monsters or any ultras to fight. So he was getting ready to leave when like the sphere attack and the sphere invasion happened. So like he's trapped on Earth, and sort of, you know, this universally renowned like fighter is now sort of relegated to like a very human existence and like living like a very hand-to-mouth existence, as we'll see demonstrated a little later in the episode. But basically, Mika, his daughter, is like, she idolizes her dad. She, you know, thinks he's just like, he's the strongest, and she wants to help keep his like fighting spirit alive. Like, just because he's been sort of confined to this alien planet for him doesn't mean he should give up on his dream, on his, you know, desire to fight and to continue to prove himself. Basically, you know, she found out that Kanata was Ultraman, and it's like, well, Ultraman's like the protector of the Earth, therefore he must be the strongest, so he'd be perfect to fight my dad and sort of like keep him in fighting shape. And he's like, and his Grace and sort of admonishes her, it's like, you know, that's all well and good, but you can't coerce people into doing that. That's not how we do things. And so they have this little meeting, and then eventually Kanata goes to leave, and he has a little moment with Mika, and while Grace watches from far, like he kind of like clutches his chest, like he has like heart pains, like because he's an old man and like the cholesterol is too high. He's got like space osteoporosis or whatever that high cholesterol disease is. Meanwhile, on the nurse dress side, the doctor, he's back and sort of like explaining, the tech and the upgrades that, Guts, Falcon, and Guts Hawk, reminding the audience that, hey, they combine and make like this super, like, spacecraft that has like this wicked laser, and basically saying he theorizes that, through their advancement, that this laser will prove very effective against the sphere. But it's still in development. And as they're talking, they get an alert, and classic Ultra Kaiju here, Red King, aka Corn Godzilla, shows up and he's like ready to scrap. He's ready to go. So they deploy the team. Kirino and Kanata go to the ground to help the people escape, and Ryumon, it takes Guts Falcon, and he's flying around, strafing, shooting, and dodging. And so the attacks, this draws the attention of Mika and Grace, and okay, it's time for old man to step up. So Grace activates his true form of this very Ultraman like alien creature, and he had his own Rise moment, Ultra S transformation, where he starts small and zooms up, gets bigger as he dives in the battle. And it's just a really cool sequence because you see Red King in the city, and then all of a sudden these gigantic swords fall from the sky in a square formation, kind of representing the four corners of of a wrestling ring, a ring post, and then he drops down from the sky. It has an interesting form, basically this Ultraman-like body, but it's black with these large gold accents, these three diamond, almost buttons going down the center of his chest. His head is what's most unusual. It's almost this obsidian, cracked lava rock kind of carapace around his head, glowing red eyes, and this big, flashy, gold, silver, cape mantle that he has on. And he had he says I'm the steel phenomenon, get ready for the 3 count of doom. It's he's very much wrestler coded, wrestler themed character. So he throws off the mantle, he jumps right into the fight, and he's just dipping, diving, and dodging around Red King. Does a sick drop kick, and it'd be people in the refugees and civilians oh, who's this new guy? I heard his name's Grace, and they're hey, he's pretty badass. And then but of course you can't have an edge for too long. His palpitations start acting up, his chest pains start to kick in, and so Kirino and Ryumon kind of taking the action. Kirino on the ground uses her. It's still funny to see these real ass guns fighting kaiju. So you see Kirino on the ground use the SMG to shoot at Red King to distract them, and then Ryumon flies in with his jet and shoots Red King in the neck, which is its weak point. And there's a really cool sequence in the middle of this fight between Guts and Red King. Red King picks up this whole ass building and just throws it, and right before he picks it up, you see this internal shot of inside the building, and Red King's charging it, and you see this little storeroom with desks and shelves and bookcases and all these little miniature supplies, which had a very similar scene in the previous episode of an office, with desk and everything, and then when the monster attack, all the little bitty pieces fly in the air, and it's just then a chance to really show off just the depth and the detail of their miniature, because you see literally this is a tiny office space filled with little tiny pieces, and you see this get flung in the air. It's very impressive what they're able to do with their miniature work. And so they're able to sort of like staggered the Red King. Grace getting his second win. He pulls out a giant swing that would make Cesaro proud. Just swings Red King right around by the tail, throws him away, and the Red King sort of like scurries away, like digs a hole in the ground and escapes. And then like all the people in the city are just like, yeah, Grace, he's so cool. And then like the crowd goes wild. Afterwards, Mika had set up this meeting with Guts, essentially, because the TPU, that basically TPU sort of reaches out to Grace and Mika, and so they have like this moment, this like kind of full exposure moment. Like Grace admits that he's an alien and he's here, and he's sort of like his past, like, I was the intergalactic combatant, and I'm living on Earth because, as we saw earlier in the season, like TPU is here to protect everyone who lives on Earth, and that includes like the alien life form. Because just because they fight like kaiju and alien doesn't mean like they're actively like deporting alien refugees or something. It's like all peaceful life on Earth is sort of under the protection of TPU, and that includes alien life forms like Grace and his daughter. And sort of like, because Grace is a little, maybe perhaps a little too spirited for her own good, she's sort of like, well, y'all had a really good teamwork out there, but how good are you with my dad? I think it'd be a good training experience for both of y'all. Keep my dad up to form, and see how good y'all really are, in like combat situations. So they sort of brokered this deal where the TPU team will, get ready for like this sort of test of strength to show like what they're capable of. At the same time, Grace will be able to like maintain a level of activity on his own to like stay like active and ready. So like, yeah, this great big training montage, like everybody's working out, like it's like TPU, like Kanata, Kirino, Ryumon, President, Vice President, they're hitting the gym, pumping iron, and meanwhile out in the field, Grace and his daughter are like, fighting, training, and like Mika, like she knows how to fight. She's doing like some spin kicks and like some weapon work, and then they're getting ready, and then afterwards, President and Kanata are like out on a grocery run, like with the whole like anime gag of like the leaks poking out of the grocery bag, and like they happen to run into Mika, who's also doing grocery shopping. But whereas you see how meagerly Grace and his daughter have been living, because like literally her idea, like her like big grocery shopping is literally a bag full of bread crusts, like from like the day old bread store, and where Kanata and the president have like big grocery bags filled with like meat and vegetables and like just like a lot of like good solid food, and they kind of like, wow, this man's kind of been like fighting monsters and stuff, and he and his daughter are like living off scraps. So they go to their house and they cook this big sumptuous meal, and they have like this big hearty dinner, and then like as they're winding down for the night, Mika's gone to bed, and like Grace sort of like has this confession, like, this really means a lot to me that you guys like are doing this sort of like to kind of show like her like show my daughter like her old man still got it, and kind of like help keeping me going, but also like to show that there's other people out there that can protect her, because he's afraid that because of like his heart pains, which he has like an attack all of a sudden, that he won't be there to protect her much longer, because he's an alien and like she's ostensibly human. So like, in any case, like he wants to feel comfortable that should something ever happen to him, she can be looked after. And it's kind of like, it kind of like gives vibes of like the Mickey Rourke movie, The Wrestler, like he's gonna like go down in the ring, he's gonna go down swinging, and sort of like this weird like manufactured suicide moment, like I'll go down fighting in this weird way. So the day of like this test of strength finally comes. And so the TPU and Grace are like setting out, and it's like this really cool cinematic scene. Like Grace is sitting there in his mantle with his arms crossed, the four cornered swords, and then you see Kanata, Ryomon, and Kirino on the ground, like locking and loading, and you have like the nurse dressed like Mothership, the Guts Hawk, Guts Falcon. They're in the air, they're ready to go, and so the fight starts, and just to show like how ready TPU is to fight, giant monsters, like the effectiveness of their teamwork, like the strength of their skills, and like their readiness to combat any type of enemy that might appear, and how suddenly they may do so. We'll find out very shortly how suddenly. So literally, like the trio on the ground, they're like shooting off their guns, like they still are like real ass military guns, and he's like bouncing like, haha, not bad, that tickles. And then all the different ships are like shooting and firing, like bouncing on. He gets ready to throw up, then like throw back a punch, but then like the earth splits open and Red King reappears, and like Red King's actually red this time because Red King's back, and he's been like embellished with the power of the sphere. So like he's this bright red body with like these like crystalline spikes sticking out of his body, which that's sort of the calling card of the sphere enhanced kaiju, like these like crystal like points just like jutting out of the body. And so like there's this big fracas between Grace and the Red King, and at this moment like Kanata's like, I feel like he feels like, okay, we're here to prove our strength to Grace and like how effective we are to this like veteran combatant, and like we can't let this monster get in the way of that. So he transforms into Decker, and he's like, you continue the test of strength to just like to demonstrate that we have the ability to fight and protect the Earth. I'll take care of Red King. So he just like bombards Red King, knocks one of these like goes power form, just like whooping them, beating them up, and then like they continue their fight for a little bit, Grace and the TPU, but Grace sees like that due to the Red King's power up, that Decker is struggling, so he decides like, okay, we gotta call this off. TPU, you win. I gotta help Decker, and so like because they have like that private knowledge, and hey, we're both this sort of secret type of hero. So he goes, dives in, starts fighting along. And at this point, that the doctor on the TPU team reminds him like that when Hawk and Falcon combine, they make Guts Griffin, and they have that special weapon that's super effective against the spheres. So the Guts and the Falcon, they combine, and they're getting ready to like charge this like anti-sphere weapon. And so Grace sort of in this moment realizes what's about to happen, like this non-verbal like show of like understanding between Grace and the president inside the Griffin, that he sort of like straddles Red King and is like, go ahead, fire the weapon, I'll hold him down and I'll make sure that it hits. Very like Goku holding down Raditz so Piccolo can fire the special beam cannon. Very that. They're getting ready to fire, but then Decker's like, hold on, I gotta save Grace. I mean, this isn't right. He can't go out like this. So he summons the dual sword that he got from Trigger, and then he sort of swipes the monster buddy cards like Wyndham, Agiras, Mira. He summons them. Basically, he summons the sword to summon the monsters so they can just pull Grace out of the way, and then so they can fire the laser, essentially. Also, Wyndham showed up for the first time in a fight, like literally for a second. But then the Guts Griffin fires their super mega ray, blows up Red King, and saves the day. And I do think it's interesting that at this point in the show, that the Guts team, like the TPU, they actually have more wins against the kaiju than Decker does, because like obviously Decker's the hero, but like when it comes to who gets the finishing blow, I mean lately it's been the Guts team, and which is like I think it's really cool because it shows. I think it's good to show that the human, they're like the more the quote regular humans, like they're still relevant in this struggle between the forces of evil. Like it's not just like Ultraman saving the day, which of course Ultraman's going to, but like they're just not there like standing there slack jawed when like there's like monsters and stuff happening. Like their technology is still effective in fighting the monsters. I think it's really cool, So they get this big win, and then Grace returns to human form, and so he collapses on the ground just because like he's so overexerted and like his heart's just giving out. So, but they're able to save Grace. So he's on the nurse side in the medical ward. So they say from here on out they'll be taking care of Grace and sort of like helping him recuperate from this battle. And now while that's going on, the doctor is like, hey, the Griffin beam, it worked. It shows how effective our anti-spear technology is. And once again, he hints of the DG-001, like this super big like weapon piece of technology that's going to help fight off the spear, which was teased in the recap special of Return of Marlulu. So we're getting a little bit of tease, like whatever this thing is, it's getting closer to being revealed. That's kind of the heads and tails of episode 9. Like I said, it was a lot of fun. It had a great story. I loved the plot of like this ultra like fighter coming to Earth to try to like make his name here and like fight monsters, and like his daughter like being really resourceful, like literally like like a comedic fashion blackmailing the hero into like, hey, fight my dad and my dad could beat up you, and sort of thing. And like in just sort of respect between Grace, Ultraman, and like the TPU, and then it shows like how effective the humans are in combating this kaiju menace. But I think is like very important to show like it's a team effort, both Ultra and humans working together to save the day. And I think that's a really cool balance that they're striking with this season. So like I said at the top of the segment, like this is one of my favorite episodes of this season so far. So yeah, great job on this one. Take another break and then we'll be back discussing episode 10. Alright, welcome back. This is the final segment of the show. We'll be discussing episode 10 of Ultraman Decker, Man and Monsters. And just right off the bat, this was a solid fucking episode. Holy crap. This was it. This episode 10 and episode 9 are definitely probably my two favorite episodes of the series so far. Like, it's really good. It's a lot of really cool like ideas and just great imagery, and there's just like a lot of really solid stuff in this episode. Like it was really cool, and plus it gives focus to a character we haven't really seen a lot of or saw too much of. And like I was kind of surprised that they got to be the focus. It's Kaizaki. She's the vice captain of the TPU team, of the Guts team, and it goes to explore her story, and you get a little bit of a flashback like 10 years prior to the series starting. Like Kaizaki is in this underground cavern with this older woman, and basically there's like this giant fossilized like kaiju buried underneath the earth, and it's sort of sets up the bigger plot of the show, how there's this mysterious new kaiju like attacking in present day. It's just like great big dinosaur type with like this red carapace and features on it, and it's attacking these other kaiju. Like there's an opening bout with this sort of amphibian fish-like kaiju, King Guersa, and it's fighting and beats it up pretty handily. It pulls like a Godzilla 2014 fatality, like wrenches that fish's mouth open and blasts a beam down at it and blows it up. And it goes to like start swinging again. It suddenly stops, and then for a second there I thought, does this kaiju have like time stopping powers or something? But it just sort of suddenly freezes and then digs into the earth and runs away. And then this new kaiju has been dubbed Neomegas. It's this heretofore unknown kaiju. It's like it has not on any of their databases, and it's like they don't know what it is, and they're kind of at a loss to explain its behavior. Like it's this giant kaiju that comes out of nowhere, fights other kaiju, beats them, and then disappears. And they're wondering like, is this kaiju good? Is it protecting humanity? Is it sort of just fighting against natural rivals like animals do? And so in order to get to the bottom of this, Kaizaki takes a team out to like the latest battle zone and basically just like start taking tissue samples and geological samples, just to kind of figure out as much as they can about the creature, because like trying to figure out, oh, if we find out where it's coming from, we can sort of like track where it's going to go. But like a lot of the samples, like geologically, you kind of prove inconclusive. Like there's from where they kind of determine that the rocks in the soil that they found on the creature's hide kind of comes from kind of all over the place, so they're just sort of at a standstill right now. And then in a quiet moment, the doctor, he sort of briefs Kaizaki and said their secret project, the DG-001, has been completed. And then she's talking to the captain about it. She seems rather apprehensive about it, discussing it further, because there's something up with this weapon, and we get a quick glimpse at this. The DG-001 is this giant robot, and there's something else about it that she seems reluctant to discuss. So she kind of changed the subject and just like assures the captain that, you know, despite working hard, she's not gonna overwhelm herself. And a few moments later, like Kanata and Kirino show up and sort of like to give her like this little can of coffee as like a little thank you for like working so hard. And like and Ryomon shows up and they all decide to have like, you know, a little hangout time. And basically they sit down in like a cafe or like, you know, the mess hall and sort of start asking her questions, like, you know, she's their superior and they don't really know too much about her. So it's like they start inquiring, like, what made you want to study monsters in the first place? And she's sort of just very frank and just like, well, it's because a kaiju attacked my hometown and a lot of people were killed and there's a lot of damage. She wants to sort of understand what kaiju are and how they behave, and it sort of goes into detail like why the kaiju attack. A kaiju attack because of natural reasons, sort of like because they're like essentially giant animals. So, you know, some of them are very aggressive, and some, you know, there's like natural changes in the earth that sort of set kaiju off and make them aggressive, or, you know, the humans affecting their environment, they influence a kaiju attack. And then also just from previous Ultra like activity and alien activity, like when the Eternity Core, this giant ball of like alien energy sort of affects the earth, and that sort of stirred up the kaiju too. So there's like all these different reasons why these giant monsters have historically been attacking, why they continue to attack, and basically it's like there's this facet of nature that they can't quite figure out, and they're sort of at a loss to determine the best way to deal with it, because it's definitely not a new topic amongst Ultra shows to show kaiju in like an empathetic light, or you know, in a gray setting, because, you know, they're not just like these intentionally malicious creatures. Sometimes they are just purely animals driven by instinct, or they're just like neutral beings trying to survive, or actively benevolent creatures. So like you have all these different aspects of what kaiju are, and Kanata is just wondering, because, you know, they have to ward off kaiju for the sake of protecting human lives, but like, you know, there's all the component of like they're living beings too. And he asks her, is like, can humans and kaiju ever coexist? Can there be a way that they can exist without us destroying each other? Essentially, kaiju's killing humans and humans having to kill kaiju. And Kaizaki said she doesn't know. Just from all her years of study, she doesn't know what can be done. And so, like, it's a really interesting, like, kind of philosophical questions. Like, you know, basically, like, what you do here, you know, these creatures are alive, you know, they have a right to live. At the same time, their very existence is an active and continual threat to human survival. So like, how do you reckon with that? And is this point that Ryomon chimes in, because he's been like sort of going over the footage of Neomega's attack, and he sort of realizes that, and all these moments where Neomegas was fighting other kaiju, after the battle is completed, it has like this sort of free range of motion until it suddenly stops in place and then it buries away. And then it's in that moment that Kaizaki remembers something from her past. Like, wait a minute, is this kaiju being controlled? And that sounds eerily familiar to something that she heard as a younger woman. And then as she races off, Kanata runs after her, and then Ryumo and Kirino learn later that Kaizaki's mentor was a woman named Maki Shigenaga, who is like the lead kaiju investigator and researcher for TPU 5 years ago. And she taught Kaizaki in school, and she was sort of like her superior at TPU in the kaiju division. However, Shigenagi was fired from her position 5 years ago, and she has since disappeared to no whereabouts. Essentially, the reason why she was let go is because that she was performing like these like ethically dubious scientific studies. Essentially, she was like gathering kaiju samples and like remains and cloning them and like putting like implants in their brains to like control them, basically to create what bioweapons out of kaiju so they can fight other kaiju, and to show that through science these monsters can be controlled and used as weapons to defend humanity. But like that sort of like goes into this ethical quandary of like what science isn't allowed to do or should do. So she was fired, and Kaizaki is one of the people who's the most outspoken against her doing these things. Then it cuts back to the deep woods and Kaizaki just explaining like all of this from her perspective to Kanata. But unfortunately, they're further deep in the woods. They sort of like are surrounded by like sniper dots, and then Shigenaga appears from the woods, sort of like chastising Kaizaki for like missing the forest for the trees, like literally inside of a forest. So she takes them hostage to her secret lair and explains that Neomegas is this kaiju, the same kaiju that her and Kaizaki discovered 10 years ago, like buried in the earth. And she used her tissue samples, her kaiju DNA, and then used that to augment the existing kaiju strength and creating this new kaiju Neomegas. And through like shadow funding from like other companies and other organizations and other countries, she was able to get the funding to basically use this like mind controlled kaiju as a weapon, and to sort of to demonstrate that this is the most efficient way of dealing with the giant monsters that plague the earth. And basically, to another extent, to prove to Kaizaki that her optimism is misplaced, that there is some way to reach as a coexistence between monsters and humans. And so she turns on Neomegas to be like this final demonstration of its strength. And this is really cool moment where like Neomegas like scoops up Shigenaga, and as it's sort of like bursting through the ceiling out of the, like you see the Neomegas rise, and Shigenagi standing in its hand, she's like looking down like scornfully. It was then that Kanata transforms into Decker, and there's like this really cool like reflective moment of the two opposing ideologies. On one hand, you have Decker holding Kaizaki in his hand, staring down at Neomegas, saying that like obviously humans will have to defend themselves, but there has to be another way to confront this kaiju issue. And on the other hand, you have Shigenaga standing in the palm of Neomegas, this like puppet of hers to use to fight other kaiju. And then the throwdown starts, like, and immediately Decker has his work cut out for him, because like he's fighting with everything he's got, and Neomegas is giving as good as he's getting. And then on the ground, Kaizaki goes to confront her old mentor, and it was still a great gag when like Shigenaga just pulls out a fucking Glock, and it's like, hold up, bitch, I'm about to tell you why you're dumb and wrong for thinking humans and kaiju can ever coexist outside of one destroying the other. And I'm about to prove that my boy can whoop your boy. And there's like a nice little like visual representation of their ideologies. Like, you have behind them, once again, you have Kaizaki, and in the background there's like, a forest that's like full of life and it's lush, and behind Shigenada there's like all these like dead and like withered trees. So like, kind of like, this visual representation of like what they believe. And so, that was a pretty nice little touch. But then, the battle continues, and Neo Megas is just like putting the hurt down on Decker. Like, he goes to hit this big beam on Decker, but then Decker counters with his beam, so that this big like beam struggle as their powers clash against each other. But Neo Megas puts some more stank on it, and then like blows Decker away. But at the last second, the droid pilot Hanejiro like swoops in with Guts Hawk and like uses its large robot arms to kind of like scoop up Decker and like basically fly him around with a jetpack. So he's like zipping, flying through the air, and Neo Megas is firing his laser off, and then Decker form changes to power type and just like kind of dive bombs out of the air, punching Neo Megas and that down on the ground. At this point, Ryomon and Kirino have like snuck up and like disarmed Shigenaga, and Kaizaki in this dramatic moment takes off the pendant that's controlling the Omegas and like shoots it. But unfortunately, not only was that pendant controlling the Omegas, it was also like it's a power inhibitor. So like now the Omegas is like gone berserk and just a rampage, and it's just beaten up. And so like when this like big clash, like see, because like Decker's got his fist like buried in its gut, and he's just like pumping like fire and energy like into it, like so much that Neomegas' body's like glowing, like burning Godzilla, just like glowing red hot. Meanwhile, Neomegas is like bitten down deep into the shoulder of Decker, to the point where it seems like his ultra body is about to break, like it's glowing, like the energy does, like he's about to dissipate in that one spot, and he's like wincing from the pain. And just like with one final push, he pumps more juice into it and destroys Neomegas, and it's like it's an enormous explosion. You think he takes him out too, and then like a giant shard of Neomegas' like carapace, like one of his like body spikes, like lands in the ground like a sword, just sticking straight up. So Neomegas has been defeated. Shikanagi's weapon has been stopped, but she's sort of resolute in her belief that humans and kaiju, there can be no peace between them, because like the existence of one means the destruction of the other. And so she doesn't believe that Kaizaki's optimism can save humanity, because no matter what, as time has proved, kaiju will always come back, and kaiju will always destroy human settlements, and then in turn humans will have to defend themselves to destroy the kaiju. And just like it's a never-ending battle until one side decides it's enough and makes that final decision to destroy the other. And Kaizaki's like, I can't do that. I don't care if it takes my whole life. I'll find a way. I find a better way for the kaiju life and human life to exist on Earth. It's just sort of like tearfully, reproaching her mentor as her mentor is like carried away into custody. And it was like, and just such a really interesting episode. I love sort of the philosophical divide, because like I said earlier, like this is something that Ultraman's always touched on, like the more ambiguity of fighting these monsters, because obviously this is a show, this is an action show, like, so fighting monsters is always going to be a part of it, but they still kind of work in like some the little thing for the people to think about. Yes, fighting monsters is cool, is badass, but are kaiju like chaotic evil always, or sort of like, or it's in a mixed bag, and it's just an imperfect world that both of these life forms have to exist in, humans and kaiju struggling against each other, so each have their needs and each needs to live, and those kind of come into conflict with each other. I think this is a really interesting point. And like honestly, I really hope that Shigenagi comes back because I think she would be like a great recurring villain. Like I really, really hope that this isn't just like a one and done type story. Like I hope like her shadow benefactors like come back, bust her out of jail, and she's like, guess what, bitch? I got more factory made kaiju, and like, 'cause I think like, because she just gives so much like mad scientist like Rhodes Gallery type villain. Like I want like her to be to Dr. Monstrous. Like every so often she comes back out of the dark. She's got another like designer monster ready to give people some trouble. And that spike that was left over from Neo Megus's corpse, like, you know, the fact they lingered on that shot means like surely that's gonna come back into play at some point. Like even if the TPU has like taken custody of like Shigenaga's like research material, like that's a giant, you know, kaiju like spike sticking in the ground. Like somebody can find it. Like those organizations are still out there. And then that wound that Decker received in the fight with the Omegas, like that's surely that's something that will come back too. Like that wound will flare up at a later date because like you don't really see that, like, you know, like the basically the kaiju biting down so hard that the Ultra's energy body was about to like burst. So like that's significant. So I feel like there's a lot of really great like open thread lines here that I really hope they come back to because like these to me they're those just so tasty not to do. Like I would really hate if none of this was like revisited at a later date in the series because this is just like there's like some really good morsels to chew on and like just ripe for further exploration. So yeah, another great episode, 9 and 10, knocked it out of the park. Great episodes, great stories, just great fun. Like these are really good. So, you know, it's been looking good for Ultraman lately. There's a lot of cool stuff coming out. The last 2 episodes are great. Like even more stuff coming on. So like we're eating good as Ultraman fans. Like it's been great lately. So as we wrap up, I just want to like thank you all so much again for listening to the past episodes of Ultraman during this break. I appreciate your patience as we're sort of like getting ready for a new phase in AYCH, trying some new things. And so obviously the Ultraman Files, they will be continue to be a part of that. I will go ahead and announce here that going forward, the Ultraman Files will be on its own separate channel the AYCH will have for it. That's right, Ultraman Files will have its own dedicated feed from here on out. So you can look forward to exclusively Ultraman reviews, Ultraman related discussion, and even other Toku topics, you know, like Kamen Rider, like Super Sentai and everything else that falls under the umbrella of Tokusatsu. That will be on the Ultraman feed. And the details for that will be given in the later date. They will be in the description of the episode, so don't worry. You'll get more details as we come forward with that. So please be looking forward to the launch of the Ultraman Files as its own separate entity under the AYCH network umbrella, and all the other good stuff we have coming up this fall from AYCH. I think you're going to be really excited about what we come up with. There's going to be a lot of really cool stuff, so please stay tuned for that. And going forward on the next Ultraman Files, I plan to do an episode discussing the issue 2 of the Mystery of Ultra 7 from Marvel and issue 3 of Breadman, so keep an eye on that. And of course, continued episode discussions as we go on the rest of Ultraman Decker. So, signing off for today, be sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, on SoundCloud, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts. Be sure to follow us, like us, 5 stars, helps us out, keeps us visible, puts us in front of new people, and always appreciate you when you do it. It means a lot to me. It's just like this solo project that I'm taking on, and like, you know, gives me energy to keep going with it. And we'll just keep trugging along. Be sure to check out everything else under the AYCH umbrella, from the main show, from Cage Greatness, and all the new stuff we have coming down the pipe. We have a lot of work put into this stuff, and we have a lot of passion, and we're going to continue to make a lot of really cool things, and we hope you all enjoy this like ever expanding, all you can eat, all you can hear buffet of really cool shows and ideas. So thank you all so much. Have a great night, and signing off with a hearty shoo watch.